Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of videos here. We haven't done too many lately, but we've done basic tools, how to build a ball diff, shocks, and the diff is next, naturally. Diffs seem to be difficult to learn how to do perfectly, I guess you could say. The biggest problem people seem to have with diffs is building them leak-free. There's a couple of things I'm going to show you that I've always done to build a diff that never leaks. Couple of small things to look for and pay real close attention to while you're assembling the diff, but overall it's a pretty easy task. This is a laydown diff. I'm going to build it up for like a medium-sized Astro track, running the 2-gear setup with 10,000 oil. This diff's been ran for over a year. I'm just going to reuse most of the stuff. There's a couple of things to watch out for in the plastic diff. One of them is these large washers that go behind the gears. These like to cone out after you run them for a while. This one's a year old, like I said, so obviously this washer is really coned out here. See if I can flip it over very carefully and show you the wear pattern. So it's wearing right here on the inside, nothing on the outside, and it's the opposite on the other side, so that shows you that this washer is coned out. So nothing really on the inside here and a bunch out here. So it's kind of an annoyance in the most diffs that use the thin washer here. That's one of the benefits of using the aluminum diff, is this washer, they designed it to increase its thickness so it doesn't warp. So this washer is probably like a 1/10 of a millimeter thick, very, very thin. And the one in the aluminum diffs, I believe, is a 1/2 millimeter, so you'll never bend that. So you don't run into this issue. When this washer bends and cones out a little bit, you gain more drag inside the diff. So, and what causes that is just the pin riding on it all the time. So the pin doesn't go from edge to edge, so it just rides here in the center, and that pin over time, just as the diff works and does its thing, when the diff action starts, it wants to push the big gears and the out drives out, just natural the way the teeth are shaped. So it'll push that pin against the washer, and then it just starts to cone it over time. So this is obviously just the stock diff, so I'm going to go through and rebuild this how I would normally. I prefer the stock diff still, especially in stock racing. It just keeps the weight minimal. I don't need the added volume and those things that the aluminum diff comes with. It's a little bit heavier, so I'd rather have a lighter diff and just maintain it. So when you do your diff, there's a couple of different options to look at as far as replacing O-rings and the shims like these. So you can get just the O-ring pack that'll come with the big O-ring and then the 2 little outdrive O-rings. These are just a couple bucks, so I would do this at a minimum when you're rebuilding your diff. Now if you're just changing oil, I don't go this deep. I'll just dump the oil, and a good cleaner to break the oil down and get it out of there quick would be like WD-40. I'll take and pull the side of the diff off, leave the 2 gears in there, spray it in, and then I'll just work the outdrive and it'll break the oil down, tip it over on a rag. That'll break the oil down quick and get it out of there, and then you can put your, if you just want to change oil, go to like 7 or 12,000 or whatever. I'm not going to go this far. I'll just change the oil real quick, slap it back in the car and go run. This would be like a maintenance thing, after, a dozen races or something. Maybe the diff's starting to bind up a little, whatever the case may be. So this would be just the O-rings, and then this pack comes with all the shims, the pins, the cross pin, everything. So this is like, you know, heavier rebuild maintenance type stuff, where changing your oil, you wouldn't need to do all this unless you had an issue, like if it was leaking. Then maybe you'd want to put new O-rings in it. Maybe you pinched one of the O-rings putting it together originally. The big black O-ring that goes around this guy is the leading cause of leaks. It's very thin, and you got to kind of watch it and pay attention. Just be careful when you put the diff together that you don't kink that O-ring. It doesn't move, and then you smash it, you'll never have a diff that doesn't leak after that. So this diff here, actually I've never done this big double throwdown rebuild. I've just changed oil in it over and over and over and over again. So this diff never leaked. The O-ring that I took out of it's right here. It's still in probably usable shape. It came out of there when I split the diff. Everything was perfect. No pinch, no nothing. So this diff never leaked at all. So this time, this rebuild, I'm going to use this kit because I want to replace these washers with nice flat fresh washers. These are, you know, got enough time on them that I can toss them. So this kit's a few bucks. This one's like $7.50 or so. So it's just a little bit more, but you want to have these in your box for sure in case a problem pops up at the track. Swap this in, you're done, you're back racing. I always used like the black grease, molly grease, whatever, on the outdrive O-rings and the big main O-ring. You can use whatever though. Something's better than nothing. I don't use the oil in here because I want the grease that's thicker to provide a seal. Even after I tore this diff down, there still were signs of black grease. So the black grease stays in there and it creates a little bit of a barrier between the oil and keeping it from running out of the diff. So, you know, any sort of grease like this, the Avid O-ring slop, just whatever you've got that's good and thick, and it'll stay on there, not just fling off. So I'm going to use this kit. So let's get this open. I got a shim hiding in the top up here in the bag. So dump all these out. I'll just replace the cross pin too at the same time. It's a good thing to replace when you go this deep and rebuild the diff. Screws aren't super important. I'll just put those aside. I don't need to replace those. So here's the two outdrive O-rings and the pins. I'll replace those. Those do wear a little bit. I can see some wear on these. So I'll put those aside. And so here's all your washers. So I just need two of these, obviously. And I want to make sure I've only got one there. Rub it in my fingers here, make sure. You don't want to put two in there. So these two, that's a spare for next time. And in my outdrives, I run 2 shims per side. So that's going to be these bigger ones. Same thing, I'm going to rub, make sure there's only one in there. Okay, and you got to be careful because these are the washers that go behind here. I don't hardly ever replace those. I've never seen those wear much, so no worries there. There's one, and here's one more. So you'll usually end up with, yeah, so you'll have a couple extra of these too, which is fine. Hang on to this stuff because over time you're going to use them, and then you'll have extras along the way. So I'll put those over here, put them in a little organizer, like, you know, little tubs and stuff. So let's see here. Let's get this stuff ready. Here's the Schumacher Molly grease. These are nice little tubs, don't take up much space in your box. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these shims and kind of move them out of the way. This is kind of the way the flow of the assembly here. So I'm going to take an out drive and I'm going to put a little bit of grease on there. And I'm going to throw a shim on. So every surface in here is an opportunity to keep this diff sealed up, because the oil, as you know, will try to run out anywhere it can. So I just put a little grease each layer here, like this, okay? And then I'm going to take my O-ring. You're going to get black grease on everything, that's for sure. Just going to put a little bit in there. I'm going to push the O-ring in. I'm going to put some more. Don't cut your O-ring with your knife, of course. Captain Obvious 101 here. So get a nice little spot, and then I'm going to push it down inside the O-ring. That'll help get the inside. So now I'm just going to push this in, move it around a little bit. I'm going to wipe this excess. You don't want to fill the diff with grease. So something like this. Okay, that's a good start. Just like that, nice and smooth, of course. Okay, and then I'm going to put my new shim on and grab one of my new pins here. If I can get it in there. Okay, right there. And this pin should go back and forth very super easy. You don't want it clamped down on that shim and O-ring, or you're going to have a ton of bind and it's going to cone that shim out instantly. Okay, so that side's done. Let's do this side, same thing. Grab some little dab of grease, a little dab will do you. Slap that shim on, put a little bit more. And just a little bit more there. And we'll just tap it all the way around. Okay. And get ready for the other O-ring. So the secret here to not having a leaky diff's coming up here in just 1 second. So I'll put some more grease on there and push it down in. Okay. Same thing as the other side. Push that baby through. And wipe off a little bit of the excess. Get that big blob off the end of it there, no worries. Okay. This pin is always a little more of a challenge. Put the new shim in. Push that down. This one's always the bugger. You got to be half psychic. Figure out where to push this through. Okay. Center the pin in the out drive, and same thing, it should be very easy and slide back and forth really nice. Don't want extra pressure on that thing. And you can also check like your end play, go back and forth, and you can watch the grease push in and out. Just a little bit of end play, which is perfect. Check it on this one. Yep, just a little bit, absolutely perfect. And over the years of building gear diffs, which originally started with 8 scale, long before 10 scale, we really used them in a lot of racing applications. I just started lining up the pin with this cross pin. I'll line it up with one of the gear pins. Just makes it the same every time, so you'll remember where that pin is. Okay, so here's one of the out drives gears, and this is the gear that came off of this side. So I always lay it out so it all goes back together exactly how it came apart. That way when you get it back together, and if there's something notchy or draggy or whatever, you've done something wrong because you took it apart exactly like this. So it worked fine before, I assume. Okay, let's get these together. So obviously I was running the alloy shaft in here, which is fine, but I'll just pop that out, and I'm going to use the stock plastic one. They work fine when running 2 gear also. So these gears still have the shims on them here. If I don't drop it, they still have the shims on them. Those shims are absolutely fine. They barely wear, if anything. Okay, so there's my cross pin. This dude's ready, and let's put some oil in it here. I'm gonna fill it up just above the gear. Go around in each little corner here and fill it up. So that's like maybe half full, not even half full. I just covered the gear basically. And then I'm gonna drop this in here. Maybe. It's gotta be like perfect. Let's see if I can use my needle nose. There we go. Perfect. So now I'll just push down on it a little bit, and I'm going to turn the gears 180 degrees. That'll help get some of the air out. And you can use your little ride racing RC air remover, the little shock pump that we have, if you want. If you're trackside and you got to do it in a quick hurry and want to make sure you get all the air out, that thing's perfect. Throw it in there, pump it. You'll be good to go in just a couple minutes. I'll just let some of the air bubbles come out. So the O-ring process is going to come next. So that little dude is going to go on here, and I try to do it dry because I think that's going to help hold it on there. If it's all greased up, I think it might just pop off over and over again, like it's kind of doing anyway. We can also put it in the case. I've done that many times before, no problems there. Maybe I'll try the case instead here. It's a little fumbly to put it on that one first. Okay. That's perfect in there. It'll hold it nice for us. When you go to clamp these together and screw them down, you just want to make sure that both halves go together nice. If you start to crank it down like this, I think that's where you're going to run into problems with it smashing the O-ring or pushing the O-ring out. So usually what I'll do is I'll put it all together and I'll hold it tight in my hands so that everything's seated almost. And I'll run the screws in and just snug them, and then make sure it's going to work good, and then finally crank them down. So I'm going to call that good on the air bubbles and that. So I'm going to put just a little bit more in here. See if you can see. Kind of spread it around a little bit. Okay, now this is about level with the case, and that's going to be too much oil. And this is where you're going to run into a problem. If you put this gear on here and then put everything together in one quick smash, you're going to have too much oil in here. As you clamp it down, it's going to push some oil out of the screws and that, but it's still going to have too much oil, because when you run the car around the track and this gets hot, the oil is going to need somewhere to go. When it expands, things expand when they heat up. So this diff's obviously room temperature, 70, 72 degrees, whatever it is in here. When you go run, you know, a 6-7 minute practice run, this diff's going to be 80 degrees, 90, 100 degrees, depending on the outside air temp. That oil is going to have to expand. So that's where people are going to pick up, oh, my diff's leaking. It's leaking out of this O-ring or the out drives or whatever. This diff's a piece of crap. It leaks all the time. It's just physics. I mean, if you overfill it, it's going to leak every single time. So here's what I do. I put the gear in here, okay, get it seated in there, Now look at how much oil that pushed around there. Okay, so now I'm going to come in here and wipe all this excess oil. Look at all that oil there. Okay, one wipe, two wipes. I want to get this wiped out completely. I don't want any excess right here, because basically all this space that I'm wiping out is where that cap is going to go. So let's wipe this out real good. O-ring's still in there nice. Okay, now this is all wiped out. So basically you've just filled the diff to the perfect level. It's not too much, it's not too little. And the best thing about this is if you do your diffs this way every time, your diff will be super consistent. So if 2 weeks ago you put 10,000 in here and you want to put 12 in, and you go run 12 and it sucks, you want to go back to 10, you're going to put the same exact amount of oil in as you did 2 weeks ago. Without, you don't have to weigh it and do all the scale crap. Just do this every single time. Piece of cake. Done deal. Okay, so the O-ring right now at this point has a little bit of oil on it, which is fine. That'll help it kind of seat in. If you wanted, you could put some black grease around it. I'm half and half. Sometimes I will, sometimes I won't. I don't see a huge difference in leaks or anything. So now I've got this pin lined up like this. Now I'm just going to slap this on, and I'm going to line up. Let me see if I can see here without blocking the camera. I want to line up my screw holes. Use a little wrench here. There we go. Okay, so these are lined up nice, and this seats down nice and flat. That tells me right now I think I've got the O-ring in the perfect spot. Everything's good, nothing's bound up. Okay, so I'm just gonna hold this. I'm gonna put screws on my wrench, and yes, I do use the electric wrench. Okay, just snug it down. I'm going to do 2 opposing screws, and then I'm going to check the action of the diff, make sure everything's good to go. I don't have anything bound up in there. I shouldn't have, because it popped together just perfect. Okay. Oh yeah, that's good. And then I'll also check my end float here and just kind of watch the grease between the outdrive and the case, and I just want a little, just a little bit like that. You got to use that sound effect too, or it doesn't work right. So let's put another screw on here, and these are just barely getting snugged. I'll finish them by hand because I don't want to run it down and strip one out or have something go sideways here. Okay, yep, everything's good. Just give it a little squeak on here. Now we're not sealing up the Exxon Valdez tankers, so we don't need to crank it down and deform everything. That's another issue I think some people have, is put the real grunt into it. These are just little 2 or 2.5 mil screws, so no worries, they'll tighten down nice. And I look around the case here in that seam, everything's seated perfectly all the way around, no gap in it. No, this end piece isn't all wavy. When you tighten it down too much, that end piece will get all wavy. And that's it. That's ready to rock and roll. And you get another spare O-ring, so throw that in our spare stuff. Just throw all these away. You could save the pin for a spare or whatever. But that's it for me on building diffs. Building the diff, putting that end gear in and wiping it, for me has been stellar throughout, 20 years of racing 8 scale and racing these cars now. It works in these cars equally as well. Everything stays nice and consistent. So there's your gear diff. If this gear diff leaks like this, I will be completely surprised. I did something wrong basically if the diff leaks at this point.